Hello, this is Susan Reichman, your Go Diabetes Project Director. I'd like to welcome you to another webinar, one of a series being offered as part of our continuing education in our Go Diabetes Project. All participants' phones are muted automatically because this webinar is being recorded, and a link to the webinar will be available on our website, www.godiabetes.org, within a week of this event. If you would like to share this webinar with your colleagues, we encourage you to do that at any time. All of our webinars have been recorded and are available for your use on our website. We talked about in the Train the Trainer session that one of the keys to the success of our Go Diabetes project is the use of patient data and the use of practice improvement tools to change systems of care. We are very fortunate today to have one of our lead faculty. Many of you met her at a Train the Trainer session. She has been a lead faculty for a couple of years, and her name is Susana Alfonso. Dr. Alfonso is an assistant professor in the Department of Medicine at the Emory School of Medicine in Atlanta, Georgia. And she has had a lot of experience in direct patient care, in patient-centered medical homes, and practice improvement. She's lectured for the American Academy of Family Physicians and worked in projects in practice improvement. So with further ado, I'm going to go ahead and have Dr. Alfonso get started, but just in case someone has questions, please know that if you use our chat function, you are welcome to ask a question on the chat function. We will hold the questions until the end of the presentation. I will read the questions so that those are recorded, and Dr. Alfonso's answers are equally recorded. So thank you, Dr. Alfonso, for being with us today, and you've got the ball.
Wonderful. Thank you, Susan. I am very excited to be here and trying this technology that's new for me. I think it's wonderful to be able to reach out to people even remotely. I miss sort of seeing people's faces, but I know I met many of you at the different conferences that we had. And when we talked about some of the tools that people might need along the way to champion change and to stay with change, I thought that a little time spent on how to sustain change and do just a little bit of review of some of the things that we talked about in terms of change during our conferences might be useful for you. Change is so hard, and I've been privileged to very recently be working with the patient-centered medical home here at Emory for Emory employees. And when I look at a patient-centered medical home, I mean, they are awesome in all the things that they're doing, but you can see the toll that it's taken on their group. It's actually pretty evident, and I spent some time with their medical director talking about change. So she asked me, can I join your group? Can I join your webinar? And I said, no, but I can send you the slides afterwards. So let's get started. I hope some of you will find these tools and slides useful for you in your practices. We'll spend some time talking about what is change and the different types of change. We'll talk a little about why change, and I think that's critical, and you'll hear me say that over and over. And if you take nothing else away from any of this talk, it's we have to keep sort of our eye on the prize and why we're changing, and why we're changing is always about patients. We'll spend a little time about leading change, looking for the different effects of change and how to manage those, and then some tips for how to sustain change. So what is change? Change is pretty simply doing things differently. But I think it's helpful to understand that there's some different types of change. Developmental change is something that we've all done. It's basically sort of the most basic kind of change, and it's learning an example of it is learning a new skill. It's finding a way to improve an old way of doing things. A bit sort of one step higher is transitional change, or moving from an old state to a new state. An example of that is going from paper charting to electronic record. still a pretty significant change. And for all of you that have gone through that, know that, boy, that can be painful. But once you get to the new place, it really, most of the time, has been worth all the effort. And it's pretty easy to see where the fruits of your labor are. The most difficult and most rewarding type of change, I think, is transformational change. And that's where we really look at a fundamental shift away from doing something to a new, completely different cultural and behavioral mindset. And the example, of course, that I see is all around us in healthcare, which is changing from our old state of episodic, fractured care to really coordinated, comprehensive, proactive care. And it's really more than just learning new skills or implementing new technology, but it's really around changing your mindset. And of course, that's the most difficult type of change. So why change? So many times when I've been a part of an improvement effort, we forget, we lose sight of why are we doing this. And the why that comes to our minds are not satisfactory. And so an example I'll share with you all is we were undergoing our medication reconciliation process, and we've been doing it for several years now. And our goal was to get the patient an updated list of their medications at every visit. And one of my colleagues said to me, I don't have time to do this. It takes me away from taking care of my patient and talking to my patient. And I thought, the issue, I believed, was that my colleague wasn't making the connection that this is taking care of the patient. This is making sure that we are providing good patient care. We weren't doing it because of the Joint Commission was coming to visit us, or Emory Healthcare mandated that we do this, but that the reason that we all needed to get on board with this was because we wanted to take better care of patients. And I think it's critical for all of us to keep our eye focused on what the prize is, and the prize is really providing patient care that we would all like to receive as patients and give to our family and friends. So you'll hear me talk a lot about focus on the need for change. And if in your change efforts you feel like people are getting distracted and kind of getting to the point of why are we doing this, it might be time to say, you know what, let's talk about why we're doing this. And I used to give a lecture to our residency program around the patient-centered medical home, and my first slide was a picture of my patient's chart because I couldn't show her picture. And it showed, you know what, this is why we're doing all the things that we're doing. It's because of patients, and it's because of patient care. The reality is no one's going to change until they understand the need for change, they get to a place where their current state isn't where they want to be, where they see a future state that's desirable, and the cost of getting there is something that they can accept. You don't always have these things happen at the same time, but if you can make an argument for that, that's when you will have much more willing participants to change. So this is just another example of our need for change. And for us as Go Diabetes change agents, our need for change is because we know that we're not doing what we could and should be doing with our diabetic patients. As a change agent, what does that mean in terms of you leading change? And we talked some about this in the conferences, but your role is critical. And one of the things, we showed you all this slide during our conferences, but I'm going to talk a little bit about some of these pieces in terms of leadership and facilitating the change process, et cetera. But it is very important for you to do a couple of things. And I guess if I had to pick one of these things, because it's hard for you as a change agent to ensure your practice is committed, right? But one of the things that you can concretely do is ensure good communication. So often our communication is fractured. It's not in writing, and it's not in multiple venues. And when you have a big change initiative, you have to communicate in many different ways. And one of the questions that I like to ask folks is, Because people will say to me, oh, yes, that's been communicated. And I'll say, well, how do you know? How do you know that what you think people know, they actually know? And it can be pretty simple to them. But oftentimes, we think we've communicated something, and we haven't. And we see examples of that in patient care all the time. I had a professor when I was doing my master's program who basically flat out said to me, you cannot over-communicate. There is no reason, if you think that it's time to do a memo, send an email, do a town hall, do a huddle, there is no reason. You can never over-communicate, so there's no reason to fear that. So some people think change sounds easy. I personally don't, but a lot of people think, wow, that doesn't sound that hard. You know, we have motivated people. Most of us in healthcare have gotten in here to take better care of patients. We know we need to take better care of patients, so we should just be able to change our practices and that should happen. Well, I know that you all know that this is not easy work. This is very hard work, and the reality is, unfortunately, that most change efforts fail. And so I'm going to talk about a couple of things that I want y'all to think about if you see that your change efforts, hopefully they're not failing, but if they're stumbling or if they're having a little trouble getting flight. The three things I want to talk about today are leadership, your team, and your plan. Of course, it starts with leadership. And I just have 2 slides for you to talk about leadership. There are so many books, articles, and, gosh, lectures on and on about leadership, but this is probably my favorite definition of leadership, and it is the ability to influence others to struggle for a shared purpose. And a couple of things I just want to point out to you. It's about influence. It's not about bullying. It's not about making people do things. You have to persuade them, because if you're having to bully or force people into things, their behaviors will not be sustained. To struggle. Leadership is not getting people to do what they would already be doing anyway, okay? The hard part of leadership is getting people to do what they wouldn't necessarily be doing. And then shared purpose. Articulating a vision and making clear to folks where we're all going is a critical, critical, critical piece of leadership. In my own experience, very recently, I was in a very difficult situation where my leadership and I did not agree on the value of articulating a vision, and our change effort failed. I mean, there's just no other way to say it, but it just failed. And a lot of it, I think, was because people did not feel like we were all moving in the same direction. I've done an exercise as a part of a conference whereby you divide up into groups, and half of the group is putting together a puzzle. Everybody's putting together a puzzle, but half of the group has a picture of what the puzzle's supposed to look like, and half of the group doesn't. Well, who do you think gets the puzzle done quicker? The group that knows what they're supposed to look like. The group that knows where they're going is going to get there much more quickly and much more easily. My second favorite definition of leadership. If your people aren't following you, you need to listen. This, I think, is so counterintuitive to most people. We think, well, gosh, we're not making progress. I need to shout. I need to find leverage. I need to give more rewards. I need to come down. I love this because this suggests you need to listen. And further in the slides, we'll talk about sustaining change and recognizing the symptoms of the different stages of change. It's about listening and watching and being aware and in tune with what your team is doing and how they're feeling. So that brings me to the team. As you all know, for those of you that have started your change efforts, your team is critical. There is no way in the world that you can make the change efforts that you need all by your lonesome. It's too much work, it's too taxing, and it won't work. But one of the mistakes I see people fall into is putting together a team and then not really understanding how that team should function within itself. And one of the things that I think is important is to look at the complementary skills. You definitely don't just want your friends on your team. You want people that bring different skill sets to the table. I have to give a kudo to the folks at the GAFP because as a group, I think they are markedly skilled at putting together a team. And you can see the fruits of that when we work together because it's a wonderful experience. And even though we're working hard and getting a lot of things done, it's painless because of the complementary skills that they have pulled together. Again, common purpose. Everybody needs to know what direction we're going in. And this is the part where I think that healthcare teams fall down, holding themselves mutually accountable. Because in your healthcare practices, the teams are often made up of folks that are at different levels in your office hierarchy, working as a team and holding each other mutually accountable is very different from sort of standard operating procedure. But it's a critical part. A team in a healthcare situation is not the doctor dictating to everybody what to do, which is what we often see happen. Another slide just about key attributes of a team, and again, individual and mutual accountability I think is critical. This slide, Implementing Change, is from a gentleman by the name of John Cotter, and he basically talks about why, in his view, transformation efforts fail. And I've bolded two of the most important things, and I know you're going to get tired of hearing me say this in this hour, but again, identifying a need and creating a shared vision. Now, I've actually taken this and used it as a roadmap, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. More than anything, to make sure that I pay attention to all the pieces. It's critical that you do your planning in advance. Before you ever begin your change effort, that you're thinking about, okay, have we identified a need? Do we have, by building a coalition, do we have the support that we need in place? Do we have a good plan? By enabling structures, what I mean by that is something like, for example, do we have the right IT in place? Now, I will say, and I say this in a later slide, so often we have these ideas of, oh, if this machine existed, if this software existed, then I could do all these things in the world. Yes, you need to have the right enabling structures, but we don't need to wait on a new software program that's not ever coming. We just need to find a different way. But having the pieces that you can put in place in terms of your IT is critical. Again, communicate with folks. Institutionalized change. What I mean by that is making the change a part of the way we do things around here. I'll give you an example of that. About 2 years ago at the practice that I was at prior to this one, we implemented, and we changed them from purely a teaching huddle, because we were in the residency program, to a clinic huddle, a let's get ready for our session huddle, and a teaching huddle. And no one thought it was going to work because we had a narrow window of time. We had 15 minutes. We didn't want to ask people to come any earlier. We didn't think they'd get there. And we didn't think that we would still be able to do a valid teaching point and get through our huddle the way we wanted to get through. Well, it was bumpy. I will tell you it was bumpy. But now, of course, now it hasn't taken 2.5 years. This has been in place for about a year now. But once it just became a part of the way we do things around here, now it's just part of the day. Huddle is a part of the day, and we go there for the clinic updates, and we go there for the teaching. And it's actually a wonderful tool. We get more information shared and more things resolved, and we resolve them right at the point of a problem. So it's been wonderful. Wasn't easy, but definitely worth it. Again, create a shared vision. We've already talked about that. Creating a sense of urgency, I think, is important. I think that for many of us, there are external senses of urgency. One of the things I like about the Go Diabetes Initiative is that there's some timelines associated with it, because unfortunately, if we don't have some timelines, if we don't have a bit of a push, most of us tend to just revert back to our mean, unfortunately. I bring the next slide up for you just, again, as a resource. This is a theory put forth by these two gentlemen, and their expertise is in organizational behavior. Now, I'll give you an example from my own practice of how this can be useful. Again, I'd like for you to consider using it as a framework. When you're getting ready to undertake a big change initiative, think, okay, have I thought of things from these different frames or these different perspectives, so to speak? I've highlighted symbolic, and I'll tell you why. Because I think we naturally remember about the structural frame. We remember, yes, okay, these are the roles, these are the rules, these are the job descriptions, etc. We remember about, okay, is this going to be a fit between what we need and what our organization demands, et cetera. Unfortunately, allocation of scarce resources is always a part of any discussion when we're trying to do something differently. But what part I think gets forgotten is the symbolic frame. And I'll give you an example from my own practice. It's actually just going on right now. There is a new nurse manager that is starting with me. Well, she is leaving the practice that I just left from. And that leadership's practice has done everything they can to attend to make sure that, that her role is being filled by someone else, that someone is performing her tasks, that the human resource part of it has been got everybody in an uproar is the symbolic piece. What does it mean? Dr. Alfonso left, the nurse manager left. What does this mean? And dealing with that, if you can deal with that in advance, if you can just say right up front, look, let me tell you what it doesn't mean, or tell me what you guys are worried about, what are your fears, what are your concerns. It is always in the background, and it will kill a change effort if you don't attend to it. So now let's talk about change. This is from the model for improvement, and basically it's something I just want to put up here to remind everybody. To improve, you must make changes, but not all changes lead to improvement. And we talked a little bit about this in our conferences. I want to review just something that we talked about in the conference. When you're using your nominal group processes, remember that's sort of your 50,000-foot view. You start with, I dare to dream. If I had a magic wand, what would my practice look like? Then you use your aim statements. Okay, this is what my practice would look like if I had a magic wand. Well, what can I do? What can I change, and by when? And how will I measure it to know that it actually was an improvement? And then using your plan, do, study, act cycles as small tests of change or boots on the ground to get to see, okay, we made this change. Is it really an improvement? So I'm just going to walk you through a brief example of this because I think this is something that people have a hard time going from the 50,000-foot view to the PDSA. And I gave this example in several of the conferences. So your 50,000-foot view might be something like, I would like to improve the care of the diabetic patients in my practice, right? We can all agree we would all like to do that. An aim statement might look like, by December, I would like to increase the number of diabetic patients who have exam to 75%. And some examples of your PDSAs might look like this. Number one, okay, we're going to try putting fluorescent stickers on the front of the chart. We would do that by Tuesday. We'll do an audit that afternoon or that at the end of that week, depending on how many diabetic patients you have. Another PDSA, creation of a power form in the electronic record. Again, don't wait on the electronic support if you don't have it. If it exists, great. We'll see if you actually use it or if you flag it, does that actually help? I'll give you an example of a PDSA that we did in my practice, again, around the list in and list out, trying to make sure that our patients had a reconciled list at the end of their visit. Well, we did a few tests of change around when should we give the list to the patient. We started by giving the list to the patient by the nurses printing the list out at the beginning of the provider sessions. And we did an audit that afternoon. And what did we find? We found that if we waited for the nurses to do that, that about half of the patients never got a list to begin with, and if they didn't get a list to begin with, they didn't get a list to go out. over time, with doing those small repeated tests of change, where that has landed is that actually the person who checks in the patient prints out the med list and gives it to the patient, whereby as soon as the patient walks in the door, we're talking to them about, this is our initiative. We want you to leave here with an updated list. Will you please look at this list and let us know if it's up to date? So by the time they've come back to the room, they've already had their list in their hand. They've drawn on it. They've marked through it. We've asked them to let us know on which of those medications need refills, and it happens almost 100% of the time. So again, back to getting started. And for most of you guys who are doing Go Diabetes, you all have already answered this question. You've already looked at what is it that you want to change, and that's part of what we did in our conferences. I just put this for you as for another time. If you ever get to the point where, okay, you've gotten through this thing, now you want to think about what else can we change. One of my favorite questions on this slide is, what is your favorite workaround? Your staff will tell you, yeah, we're supposed to be doing this like that, but we actually work around it because this doesn't work for us. I put a slide on here to review the nominal group process. For those of you that actually participate in one of our conferences, I just have this up there for you to refer back to if you want to walk through it. The main thing I want you to take away from this slide is that the power of the nominal group process is that you level everyone out, so to speak. Everyone has a voice. Everyone has a vote. And I think it's one way to draw people in and say, hey, you know, dream. If we had a magic wand, what would our ideal diabetic care look like? Sorry, everyone. I'm trying to advance my slide, and it's not advancing. Give me just one moment. I'm sure it's user error. Susan, I apologize. I think I'm gonna have to ask for your help. It's just stopped responding.
That arrow's not working?
No, ma'am. I am hitting the little arrow to go forward, and it's just not responding.
Okay.
Either way, it's not responding forward or backward. Well, that's okay. I can keep talking through the slides. I know that there's people watching this. Do you suggest that I try to pull up the PowerPoint separately so that I can just keep going through the slides?
Why don't you hand me the ball and I'll work on that while you're talking.
Okay, but I need to pull up the PowerPoint so that I can follow it. I was going to pull it up just on this computer that I'm at.
Okay.
Okay. All right. I'm handing you the ball. All right. And I'm afraid, okay. So something just happened. The screen went to a full screen view.
I did that.
Okay.
I was trying to find another way to advance slides. All I see are the 18 slides. I'm not sure where they went. Okay. We've got two choices. You can close this and reboot the PowerPoint presentation, or you can continue to talk if you can visualize it and we can attach the slides as a PDF.
Okay. Well, this is a lesson learned for me because I don't have the slides in front of me. Is it not working? It'll go. Oh, so this is saying that it's at the end of the slides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure why.
Okay. I guess I would lean toward trying to get the slides open again.
Okay, I'm going to hand you the ball, and you go ahead and close the presentation and reopen it.
Now, Susan, would this be a time to ask the group if they have any questions that we could maybe address?
I can do that. Absolutely.
Through
our technical challenges. Haven't had this one before. Every time we do one of these webinars, we have some little glitch. And as Dr. Alfonso said, if anyone in the audience has a question, now would be a good time to go ahead and ask that using the chat function. For those of you who are just listening and don't have questions, again, wanted to remind you that all of these webinars are recorded. We've had a series of them covering everything from using metric to a wonderful one on nutrition, medical nutrition therapy. We had one recently on developing research posters for publications. We also have had one on smoking cessation. And we're going to have one coming up soon for those of you who are interested in outcomes on results from our 2010, 2011, or 2010 Go Diabetes project, and that one will be in July. We've had a couple of questions, and I'm going to go ahead and read those so Dr. Alfonso can respond to those and hopefully multitask by bringing up the PowerPoint as well. First question is, the Go Diabetes project has been excellent in getting everyone to think about attacking the problem of diabetes. We need to do the same thing with all chronic diseases. Do you see the PCMH as the answer to most of the issues that arise in making these changes? That's a bit off topic, but Dr. Alfonso, with your experience with PCMH, do you have a response to that?
I do, and I think that, the PCMH, the Go Diabetes Initiative and the principles behind the PCMH really go hand in hand in the sense that you have to have strong leadership, you have to have an empowered team, and you have to have a good plan that, has all the steps in terms of identifying the need, et cetera. So I do think that the patient-centered medical home model is a wonderful way to implement changes and improve the care of many patients with chronic diseases. So, yes, I do. I see that it just absolutely goes hand in hand.
Thank you. Another question: how are you doing on getting your slides going?
Well, I went back into my computer and pulled the slides up, but I don't know how to put them into that view again. So I have my slides open, but not in this WebEx frame.
Okay, do you see at the top on the left-hand side, there's two tabs. One says Quick Start, one says Event Info.
Yes.
Click Quick Start.
Yes.
And that'll give you that share file.
Okay.
And go ahead and open the PowerPoint in that.
Okay. All right. Now it's open. Can you see it?
I can. And you can go down to slide 18, which is where you ended up.
Okay. And is your view of my whole screen, or do you see just the slide?
I see the presentation shows what's called the, not the slideshow view. It shows all your individual slides on the left.
I see. Okay. So because I opened it in a different way, do you mind if I leave it like this so that I
No,
can
that's
my notes?
fine. And
Okay.
you may, yeah,
All right.
that's
All right. So sorry, we'll get started. And I know that there were a couple of other questions, and I'm happy to take those at the end. All right. So we talked about the nominal group process and what the power of that is, in my opinion. I just put this up here for your information. Sometimes I think it's hard. People have, once the gates open, there's a flood, and people have all kinds of great ideas. And one of the difficult things is, okay, where are we going to start? I give this to you all for your consideration. This is a way to focus your efforts. And it's essentially what you do is you just list all your efforts, and as a group, you say, okay, how important is this, and how easy do we think it's going to be to accomplish? This sounds almost common sense-wise, but I will tell you this is very powerful. And then it doesn't become about what Susie Alfonso wants to do or Susan Reichman wants to do. It becomes about, well, we've talked about how easy it would be and how important, and where we focus our efforts should become evident. And I'll show you what you do. So you use the focusing table, and then you take all of your different options and plot them. And then you just pick the ones that are the easiest to do and the most important, and you start with that. Along those same lines, pick what's most feasible, okay? Yes, we would all like full PCMH implementation by next Tuesday, but that's not feasible. But it might be feasible to train the MAs on how to do a foot exam, or it might be feasible to implement for all diabetic patients to get their Pneumovax once they come in the door. So start small. I talk a little bit here about technology barriers. Use manual methods if needed. Yes, the technology should support us. And boy, if I had $1 for every time I look at our electronic record and I say, gosh, if our electronic record would only do this, I would be a multimillionaire. But we're waiting on our electronic record. It is changing, but don't let that be your barrier/excuse. And again, create a sense of urgency. One of the ideas behind using a PDSA is it needs to be simple. What can you try on Tuesday? What can you try this week? I would like to make a distinction between tests of change and tasks. So tasks are things that you have to do before you can actually change something, okay? It's a part of the change effort, but it's not change by itself. So training the staff to do a diabetic foot exam is a task, but all by itself it's not going to lead to any change, and it's definitely not going to lead to any improvement. A test of change is a small trial that could enhance your patient care. So, and remember to always ask the question at the end, did this change lead to an improvement, and how do you know? Now, once you get into change, and this is the practice I was with yesterday, I want to give you some ideas of some things to look out for and how to deal with those things. This is, again, a model of 4 steps or 4 stages in a change transition, and those are denial, resistance, exploration, and commitment. Some of the things that people might say, and I know you all have all heard this, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. Or the one I hear, my favorite, is, yeah, we did this back before you were born, and, that didn't work either. What people might do, yeah, I'll get right to that, but actually don't make any change in their behaviors, or just flat out continue with work as usual. What this might mean, it might mean a lot of things, but one of the things it might mean is a lack of understanding about, A, our patient care. One of the things I think is powerful to motivate folks is, and especially providers, is data. And specifically, a lot of our providers, I think, don't really believe that we need to make changes. So I'll give you an example of that. One of my colleagues was very resistant to doing PQRS reporting. And it wasn't until he saw that, gosh, our documented ophthalmologic visits for our diabetic patients were less than 20%, that he got on board with, oh my goodness, we need to do something. So sometimes I think that denial of, yeah, I don't need to really worry about this, is a lack of understanding of really how important or where we are versus where we think we are. What do people need? They need more understanding about the change, how it affects them, and how it affects our patients, or how it could affect our patients. Resistance. I know you all have heard this. This is crazy. This will never work. We're doing too many things. And some of the behaviors you might see: complaint, finger pointing, blaming, or flat out withdrawal or ignoring. It doesn't necessarily mean that folks are resisting the actual change. It doesn't mean that people don't want to get where we want them to be, but it's the road, it's the transition that's what's painful for most people. What do people need, and how can you help them get through this? Help them understand that a lot of it is feelings of loss of control and fear. And this may sound, as my husband says, hokey to many of you, but I want to impress upon you that feelings of loss of control and fear of the unknown are extremely, extremely powerful and extremely, extremely damaging to a change effort. The only way I know how to address these is just right on. And I just ask people flat out, tell me what you're afraid of. Because if you don't get to and you don't address those fears, your change efforts will not move forward. Once you get past a little resistance, people start to explore. Now, they describe this as a neutral zone, but I actually think this is a bit on the downhill slide, because once you get here, well, people are willing to think, okay, well, okay, maybe, okay, if you do this, then I'll do that. What people might say, sometimes they feel confident that we can do this, and sometimes they're like, this is a terrible idea. A lot of times people will bargain with you, and you have to be open to that. Okay, you know what? We thought we were going to do this in a month, but let's move our timeline. Let's do it in 3 months. The practice that I was with yesterday, they've decided to apply for NCQA certification by July 25th. And I talked to their medical director yesterday, gosh, help me understand why you set that date. Well, she said it because it's their 1-year anniversary, and I think it's a wonderful goal. But you really have to think of, what is it going to cost you to get to that, and is it going to be the end of the world if you apply August 25th and not July? What this might mean, again, this is a time of chaos, but it's also a time where people start to maybe think outside the box, and people take one step forward. Where they might have been standing still, firmly planted, and refusing to move, they might be taking a step forward. So what do people need, and how can you help them as their change agent? Help them get organized and help them explore the things that they're thinking about. And then this is where we all want to get to, right? We all want to get to where people are on the other side. The change feels good. What people might say, you know what? This feels really good. Our meetings are starting to feel good. Our day is starting to feel great. I saw this firsthand with our huddle. It was a little bit painful at first. It felt very artificial. We were really following a script. We were keeping our close eye on the time, because we had made a commitment to the other faculty that we would still give them 7 minutes to do a teaching point, and we were committed to give them their 7 minutes, because I knew the first time we didn't give them their 7 minutes, this huddle was going to go down the drain. But once people got used to it and it started being functional, people started seeing that it was useful, it felt good. It was probably the best 15 minutes that people spent, because you learned what was going on with the clinic, who was there, who wasn't there, and you learned a teaching point for the day. what people might do. You'll see people collaborate. You'll see people plan. And what this means is people are getting committed. They're getting used to the change, and they're embracing the change. So some things to look out for. Look for the defensiveness. Look for people's anxiety. Look for stress. The medical director I met with yesterday, I have just been at that practice 3 times, and I'm going to start going twice a week for a half day. And I wasn't 100% sure that I was going to share this with her, but she asked me. She said, Susie, as an outsider, what's your gestalt? How do you think people are looking, and how do you think people are feeling? Which I thought was pretty insightful on her part, because she knows that she needs to attend to that aspect. And what I told her was that people looked really tired. You can tell the fatigue of change. It's evident in the people. As we sat around and did a quality improvement meeting, you could just see it in people's body language. You could see it in the tone of voice. They have lost a little excitement. And we spent some time talking about, okay, what can we do to bring the excitement back? So just as a review, sustaining change, keeping the change alive, keeping the change exciting. Remember that people will go through the transition at different speeds, and try to be in tune that not everyone's going to get there at the same time, and people will backslide. You know, especially if you have something that you think works and it stops working, people will quickly revert to an old habit. When you can, front-load rewards. Front-load rewards and do things that are the low-hanging fruit, because that one success, that first success, is very powerful. Remember to recognize people. Yes, I wish we could give everyone money for recognition, for reward, but recognition is actually an extremely powerful reward and something that we don't often do enough of. Make it safe to make mistakes. Give people the venues that they need to say, you know what, I know this sounds really, really crazy, but this is the idea that I have. And a lot of that is behavioral, meaning not to minimize when people make a suggestion, no matter how crazy it sounds to you. You know what? Those people that are boots on the ground, they have great ideas. You just have to give them the opportunity to express it, and the environment they'll feel safe bringing it to you. Provide tools the team needs to succeed. Remember to let them process their feelings, but also give them the concrete tools, give them the training, give them the hardware, give them the equipment that they need. Don't expect them to make changes and they don't have the tools at their disposal to make those changes. And good luck. This is hard work. But it's definitely the work, I think, that is so rewarding right now. And for those of you that are change agents, you're at the forefront. A lot of what I shared with the medical director yesterday that I spoke to was a bit of a pep talk. You know, they are at the forefront at Emory, and they are leading the way, and we are all going to learn from each other right now, the things that work, the things that don't work. But it is hard work, and remember to give yourselves as change agents a break and a event and an outlet for when you're feeling down, and that's why we're here. Email us questions, email us comments, email us concerns or stories. We're happy to help walk you through them as we can.
Thank you, Dr. Alfonso. We do have a couple more questions. One of them was, let's say that we've been successful in implementing a change, and my question is, when should and how do we go back and look to see if that change was sustained? Is it 6 months? Is it a year? What would be your recommendation?
Well, I guess the thing I would recommend is more immediate than that, because if you make a change, first of all, you want to make sure that you put something in place to ensure that it was an improvement, right? And if it was an improvement, if it was not an improvement, then you certainly don't want to keep expending energy on something, on a change that's not helping you to improve. And if you're reverting back to your old ways, you want to know about it sooner versus later. So I would say for a small test of change, for a really small test of change, I would measure it either that day or the next day. For something that's a little bit bigger, maybe the following week or at the most a month. But it would depend on what it is you're trying to measure. So, for example, if you were trying to measure your increased foot exams, then you need to give yourself some time to have enough volume, et cetera, et cetera. But I would go for less time.
Okay. And the other question we have is, let's say we've implemented a change and we've been able to sustain it, but you talked about team fatigue and trying to maintain excitement about this whole process. Should we take a break for some period of time before we go through the process in another cycle, or should we just keep going at it?
Well, I guess what I would do is I would try to get with your team. First of all, why are you thinking that your team is fatigued? And talk to them about if they are fatigued, why are they fatigued? Is the change onerous because people are having to stay until 6 o'clock at night to do the extra work involved? Or is the change onerous because they're having to do something manual for which there might be an electronic solution? You know, change should make things ultimately better, whether it's better for the practice or better for the patient. Now, change fatigue, just sort of always doing things differently, I think that, again, I think it's very individual to your practice. So if you have had this, I'll give you an example in my practice. I'm in a new practice. We opened in January. For the first 2 or 3 months, we were putting into place every single process from top to bottom because we're in a different model. We're based in an employer's corporate headquarters. And so guess what? We got to March, and we have stopped making any changes because of that very reason, because everyone was just feeling like, oh, my goodness, everything is constantly changing. And so I think it's okay to take a break for a short period of time and say, okay, you know what, we're going to just leave things as they are right now, and my deadline for the group is as soon as the nurse manager comes in, we're going to start fresh. Because really, you want to be constantly changing. You want to be constantly, and I guess changing for the future is not the best term. You want to be constantly learning. You want to be constantly learning and thinking about how can we do things better.
Thank you so much. Those are the end of our questions, and we're coming up to the end of our time. So again, if you have found this to be a useful webinar, we encourage you to go to our website, www.godiabetes.org, and look for the link under resources to this webinar as well as the previous ones that have been given and recorded. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. We appreciate it. Take care. Bye.